Okay, so thank you everybody for waiting for this. But this is one of the talks I've really been excited about. So I think you're in for a real treat. So Dr. Todd Chang is the Divisional Director for Research and Scholarship for Emergency Medicine at Children's Hospital Los Angeles. He has been principal investigator in a variety of grant-funded and research initiatives in examining gamification, serious games, and the use of virtual reality in healthcare settings. And with that in mind, it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Chang.
Thank you guys for sticking around for the last parts of this conference. I don't get the pleasure of speaking with non-doctors often, so thank you for being real, literally. So my name is Todd Chang. I'm faculty at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, and I practice pediatric emergency medicine. I tend to work the nights and weekends, the shifts that nobody else wants. So that's why I get to be here with you during the day. All right. So I get to talk a little bit about some of our experiences with virtual reality and shift the gears from what you may have already heard from our previous speakers who have been really great with health and VR. We're going to talk about the 4 domains, think about actually how to implement the product that you have created or collaborated with. I get to tell you a little bit about the problems that we face and how we overcame some of them, some of our results from the evaluations and changes since then. Many of you have already heard about the patient-focused games where you either take them out of reality or that you put them in a specific reality, but there's also this provider-focused versions where the games are allowing practitioners to visualize better whatever it is that they're practicing or simulating it. And here's what I mean by that. Therapeutic escape is pretty easy. You take them out of a reality that's painful, scary, or unfamiliar and put them in something that's more fun. It could be a beach for adults, and for children, it could be penguins or you're shooting something funny. Alternatively, you can be using it as therapies. This is a game from Nancy Kasam-Adams in the University of Pennsylvania at Children's Hospital Philadelphia called Coping Coach. This is for children who've gone some sort of traumatic event, whether it's a fairly lengthy asthma stay, a house fire, car crash, or community violence, and they go through a narrative game making choices to improve their resiliency. On the flip side, for the providers, you could do visualization as simple as 3D anatomy for complex congenital heart disease and postoperative changes for both the provider and the family. This is Stanford Heart. Or we've done what we call virtual reality simulation, where we take what we used to do in mannequin-based simulation and brought it to the digital world in virtual reality. And this is where I'm going to concentrate on first and foremost, because it turns out that healthcare is the only high-risk industry in which continuous and proper rehearsal is not normal nor expected. I mean, frankly, Broadway has figured this out, and we certainly haven't, right? When was the last time your appointment got canceled because your doctor had to practice, right? And at the same time, you think, wait, why is he or she not practicing? So when you think about games and their ability to provide the practice, these are some of the implementation challenges that we ran into that I would like you guys to be aware of, and you'll be already a level ahead of your other peers. They're divided into 5 different things. I tried to be clever, but this is about as grammatically correct as I can make the cleverness. So what, why, to where, how, and within which. We'll cover each of these one by one. And the topic and content of what you make is going to be important because games in VR are supposed to provide experiences. That's how people learn. That's how people change behavior. That's how people remember and feel. However, games in VR are really optimal for exploring certain set of experiences, what we call low-frequency, high-stakes events. And in healthcare, there's a whole set of them. In architecture and engineering and disaster planning, they have their own set. But not every experience needs a game. Right, so there's no need for this game to exist, but it's hilarious. However, for our purposes, in my field in emergency medicine, this is our low frequency, high stakes event that we would love to get more and more games to help train. And then we think about competition. When running away from a bear, you don't outrun the bear, you outrun the person next to you. That's how you win,
right? So that's the art of competition. You don't have to worry about the actual bear, but you have to worry about the things around you. And so when you're designing healthcare games, whether for the patient or provider, you have to take into account all the things that are not games that might be the competition. In healthcare education, for example, mannequin-based simulation is pretty awesome. These mannequins now talk, they move, they blink, they seize, they do all sorts of things, and they're great for training. We still use textbooks. I still have mine from back in the 20th century. And we have great actors. If you're in LA, you just go to the Starbucks. Actually, you're in New York here, so you can probably do the same thing here and grab an actor to play a patient so you can practice the communication skills. This is your competition, not each other. Alternatively, if you're in the digital games world, the non-digital games may also be your competition. There may be a card game that's more suitable for your topic than what you're thinking. There may be a board game that's more suitable, right? And so think outside of just the games and your digital games. Perhaps there's something else that can complement or oppose what you're trying to do. Goals and objectives comes from the education world. This is Bloom's taxonomy if you're an education theory nerd like I am, where you have certain behavior manifestations you want by the end of the game. Perhaps you just want them to learn something or know something or recite a fact. You remember those really bad multiple choice tests back in grade school? Alternatively, you want them to fundamentally paradigm shift something. And that's going to be a harder deal, of course. But every game that you create for learning or for effect or for change must have a predefined goal. And you get to decide what level it is, and that changes your game mechanics. Delivery and feedback. So there's this thing called Kolb's learning cycle. Like I said, this is the theory nerding out. Kolb's learning cycle is how healthcare practitioners learn from rare instances. We first experience a concrete experience. This could be dealing with the death of a cancer patient. This could be your very first cardiac arrest patient. You observe and reflect what happened. You formulate new thoughts. What should I have done? What should I have not done? And then you try and practice it in the next setting. And what happens with games, the way that games change behavior in healthcare and in healthcare patients, is that games in VR occupy this sector right here. Your game provides a nice concrete experience that you can make, that you get to control. And it also provides a new situation where new thoughts, reflections, and abstract concepts can be practiced upon in a safe setting. And then finally, the environment and context is actually really important for the game that you create because there is no such thing as the perfect game. There is such a thing as the perfect game within a specific context. So, and one example is the idea of assessment. There is no, how many of you, when you go to before you chose your doctor, went to Yelp, Google, or some rating system to figure him or her out? Right, and why do we do that? You want the best treatment for yourself, your family member, your children, right? It's normal, and that's what you're supposed to do. But how do you know if they're going to be good at something that they've never actually encountered yet, right? They're probably good at common colds or an ear infection or some simple things, but what are they good at, for example, a disaster? If a mass casualty happens, how do you know that they can perform, right? They just got out of medical school. They haven't seen a mass casualty. How do you know? So formative assessment is the idea that you can assess something, but the game will then help teach them and cultivate new skills in a more friendly setting. Summative assessment is the idea that, no, this is the final test. If you fail, you fail. If you pass, you pass, right? And the game that you develop under these two paradigms are going to be fundamentally different. So putting all these together, thinking about your game in a specific context changes the way that you program the game, changes the subject matter experts, and perhaps the way that you market or use the game in the healthcare setting. So these are the 5 things that I'd like you to think about, and we'll show you some of the things that we thought about during our journey in virtual reality. Okay, so that's, credit goes to Dr. Josh Sherman. He's currently the head of PM Pediatrics, which is an urgent care center in California. But I also want to thank our funders, Oculus, BioFlight VR, and AI software programming, and then my hospital for allowing me to play games while at work. So our topic was pediatric emergencies. That's what we knew about, and they tend to be very, very rare, thankfully. Our competition was mannequin-based simulation. And how many of you are CPR certified or first aid or something like that? So you've seen some of those mannequins that you've tried to do CPR on, but the hospitals usually have the fancier versions where they blink really fast if you do it right, and it's really creepy. The goals and objectives were to lead a successful resuscitation, which means a child is in absolute distress, whatever the reasoning is, and you have to get them out back to life, right? It's a very, very tough skill to teach, and you don't want to make a mistake during the real thing. The delivery that we chose was performance metrics. We thought the game could use some points, maybe some badges, maybe a leaderboard down the line if we get enough people to play, the usual stuff that people use in games. And we thought that the environment should be summative. We wanted to create this hardcore test to see if a physician graduating is ready for the emergency department. So, keeping those in mind, we created something that looked a little like this. I cut it short for time reasons, but now that you can unclench your butt cheeks. The entire VR scenario was centered around two possible scenarios. That was, do you guys recognize the medical condition? Anyone? Asthma, yeah. So there's asthma, and we threw on anaphylaxis on top of that. It was a peanut and a peanut allergy, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't know if you saw the epinephrine injection choice over there as well. So we created two scenarios, status epilepticus, which is a seizure that does not end, and anaphylaxis, and put people in that situation. This was the beginner mode. The advanced mode had more screaming, the lights would flicker on and off, and eventually you're basically had a brick in your pants. And one of the things that we evaluated was that we wanted this to be stressful. We wanted this to be the test to end all tests to see if you are ready for the emergency department. So we hammed up all the stress. And we measured people's heart rates, in fact. So one of our evaluations was comparing heart rates on virtual reality. So we had heart rate monitors, the easiest thing to do when you're in the hospital. And then we hooked up our practitioners, my colleagues, and then followed them around with their heart rates during a real resuscitation and measured the comparisons. The second thing we did, actually before we get to that, let me show you the results. Between the heart rate changes, if in the emergency department you started from a mean of 82, and once you saw resuscitation, your heart rate went up by a mean of 13.9. On the other hand, when you were in virtual reality, you started at a lower place and you went up by 6.5, and these were actually not found to be equivalent. In other words, we did not elicit the same heart rate changes as we did in a real resuscitation with a real child. So initially, we were kind of disappointed. We wanted to be so realistic that it would be as replicant. But one of the other things that we evaluated, VR causes less physiological stress in the real event. We also evaluated the difference between our third-year graduating residents and our experts, expecting to see a massive difference. Our experts would be so awesome, our residents would be a little bit not so great, and we actually only found a few things that were different. Out of 24 variables, they only differed on 2. The first one being the attending physicians, these are the experts, versus the residents, for those of you unfamiliar with how we train. The residents are like the 24-year-old millennials currently, and the attendings are our old farts like us. We found that the attendings took only 30 seconds to jab a ballpoint pen into someone's throat during anaphylaxis, not a ballpoint pen, of course. And the residents actually took 90 seconds, which is a little too late for that, unfortunately. However, that was the only thing that was different about the asthma anaphylaxis scenario. Everything else was done spot on. In the seizure scenario, the residents tried to do this exact same medications 4.67 times instead of giving up and moving on. We gave up a little bit sooner than that, which is the right move to do when it doesn't work. But that's it. Every single other action that the residents did were on par with the experts. So kind of nice, but a little disappointing. We thought that this test would be the test to end all tests, but it didn't turn out that way. We only had a mild ability to distinguish between the two groups. So the lessons learned was that when you create a game, you may not have the right context in the first try, but you can use that game and shape that game to something a little bit more optimal for its perfect context. It will take 3, 4, 7, 10 iterations until you find the perfect game for the perfect situation. And so what we did instead was that we switched these here. The goals and objectives were, because your heart rates did not go up as much, we thought it was more gentler. Maybe it's easier to learn in that environment than it is in, say, the real environment where your heart rate went up too much. We also chose live debriefing. In other words, the point system probably didn't do very much because there are very few differences between experts and our graduating residents. So we wanted to do live debriefing, which is an in-person debriefing. And we decided, because it's gentler for your heart rate, that instead of the end-all and be-all, we were going to use it as a scaffold. This is formative assessment from now on. So try it out, see what mistakes you've done, let's learn from it, try again. Remember the Kolbs learning cycle. So we modified the context of the game without having to change the game itself. And now what we do is, this is live debriefing. She's actually, of course, acting in this photo, but after we record this on here, we use Camtasia to just record the screen on the Oculus Rift when it projects over here. And we go over the recording. Hey, I noticed that you didn't pick epinephrine, that you picked a different medication for when you heard wheezing like asthma. Tell me what happened, right? So this is a little bit less stress, more gentler learning, formative assessment. And I actually go one-on-one with each of the interns now, the more novice group, who actually need that little scaffolding and gentle introduction. And this has actually worked surprisingly better than what we had initially intended. So failure number 1, success number 2. And that's what I wanted to impress upon you. Your first game is very likely going to fail in healthcare. It just is. But what it does do is it helps you find the perfect context that is just within reach. So because of this finding, we were able to then push this to quite a different hospitals. We actually have all of these places, including 2 places in New York that are now using it, as well as 2 places over here in Switzerland and Austria. We're working on a German translation right now. And my German is not so great, so somebody else is helping me, thankfully. And I wanted to show you this final video before we left, just to show you why we're doing this in the first place. If you're looking at all the 911 emergency calls in the United States, about 1% of all of those are serious critical pediatrics, which is relatively rare. It's technically a good thing.